Okay, this is my live stream for today, Wednesday, April the 16th, 2025. This is a continuation of my discussion activity that I have been doing with respect to the concept of the existence of a God. And I'm looking for people to join my chat and to discuss and to give me explanations for the belief in a God. If you are a person who does not believe in God, I'm willing to talk to you too, and maybe we can chat about maybe the ideas and such that we have about why God does or does not exist. So let's start this particular stream. As I've stated in my previous streams, I'm attempting to build up my subscription list. I'm looking to get 1,000, it's 1,000 subscribers to my channel, which is a requirement from YouTube, and also 4,000 watch hours, which is another requirement from YouTube to activate the monetary program on YouTube, basically to start, generating revenue from your stream. So if you join my live stream and you like what you hear and you'd like to join, that would be great. If you view the stream as a video later on, you like what you see and you want to join, that would be fantastic. That would be great. And I would greatly appreciate it. So I'm continuing with respect to how I've been doing my streams up to this point in time, which is basically evaluation activity. I'm going to be going over YouTube, specifically videos that have talks about the claims of the existence of God. And I'm currently going through Thomas Aquinas video that talks about his life and how he came about the rules and the evaluation that he had done that is used to declare the existence of a God. And I will start the video now.
Today, we're diving into the mind of one of history's greatest thinkers to explore, one by one, the 5 rational ways to prove the existence of God. In the 13th century, there lived a quiet young man, introspective, eyes wide open to the world around him. In the classroom, while his peers debated loudly, he sat silently, lost in deep thought. His teachers nicknamed him the Dumb Ox because he rarely spoke his mind. What they didn't realize was that inside him, an extraordinary mind was taking shape. Thomas was born around 1225 in Italy, into a noble family. His calling for study emerged early, and his parents, hoping for him to have a prestigious career, sent him to be educated by Benedictine monks. But Thomas had other plans. Instead of following the path his family had laid out, he chose to join the Dominican order, a decision that deeply upset his relatives.
Okay, so this is just obviously an introduction to Thomas Aquinas, talking about how he started down the road to religion, how he became an advocate of the concept of the ideas purported by religion, and, the things that potentially were reasons for him to move down that path, even though they didn't get into it detail. They just indicate the fact that it was something that was interested to him.
His masterpiece, the Summa Theologica, is a monument of human thought. In it, Thomas tackles fundamental questions about God, morality, the soul, and the structure of the cosmos. He doesn't just give answers, he teaches how to ask the right questions, leading readers on a logical, rational journey. His 5 ways to prove the existence of God are just a small part of this vast work. Now let's explore the 5 ways he used to prove, through logic alone, the existence of a divine creator. A perfectly still lake, its surface as calm as a mirror. Suddenly a stone falls in, and ripples begin to spread. But the stone didn't throw itself. Something or someone had to move it first. Now expand that idea to the entire universe. Everything is in motion. Trees grow, winds blow, rivers flow, planets spin, galaxies drift apart. But nothing can move itself. Everything needs an initial push. From this observation, Thomas Aquinas developed his first rational proof for the existence of God, the unmoved mover. Imagine a train with an infinite number of cars. Each car only moves because the one in front of it pulls it. But without a locomotive at the front, the train would never move at all. The first mover is essential for motion to happen. And what could this first mover be? It can't be anything physical, because every physical thing needs to be moved by something else. This mover must be immaterial, eternal, and self-sufficient. Thomas Aquinas calls this first mover God.
Okay, this is probably relatable to the concept of cause and effect. The aspect of the unmoved mover, it's a little bit peculiar to me. The aspect that it appeared to be the validation that something had to start, and this concept of things need to move to start. But there was this being who was the start of everything, doesn't need to be moved. Now, I guess you could probably argue that, and I'm really not going to argue that. Again, this concept of things need to move and the reasons behind it, well, you can come to a lot of conclusions from review based on your understanding of how things move. My point in this particular area has to deal with how was it determined that there was a God that started everything. Now the rest of the video is going to probably, or to some extent, continue with this idea and go into continual declarations of things need to be what they are only because of a God. There's a lot of question marks behind that. This aspect of things need to move and something needed to move them. Everything had to start off by being moved, and there had to be something that started everything, therefore God. And the one thing I would point out is, how do you know that that's actually the case? That a God had to be the first mover. I'm also thinking about things that never move, in the aspect of how do you describe that in this way of looking at things, the explanations that were given here. And what does that mean? If something never moved, does that mean it doesn't exist? Does it mean it moved in some other fashion? I don't know. And again, as I said in my previous videos, these are the questions I'm bringing up to the religious community. I'd like to hear what you think about this, what you think is the explanation that provides the clarity or the confirmation of a God being what has been indicated. I personally can't come to that conclusion. The rest of the video is going to continue down this line. Excuse me.
Suppose you walk into a brightly lit room and wonder, what's lighting this space? You see a light bulb on and ask, what makes this bulb shine? You notice it's connected to a wire, which is connected to a power grid. But what if all these sources of energy were just relays of something else? At some point, there has to be a primary source of power, a power plant, that generates all the electricity and makes the bulb glow. In the same way, everything in the universe is like that bulb. It depends on something else to exist. But if we keep tracing these dependencies backward, we eventually need to arrive at a supreme source of existence, something that doesn't depend on anything else, but from which everything else comes. According to Aquinas, this ultimate source is God.
Okay, this is a continuation of the previous comments, cause and effect. And the conclusion was that everything needs a cause and something had to start it. My question here is, how was a God the answer to that question of what was there or what caused the first? I don't concretely or clearly see how the concept of a God is a reason for everything else. The example that they gave was somewhat indirect with respect to what they were trying to validate. The aspect of there is a process of things occurring and there had to be something that started it, and the conclusion was that it was a God. In my previous videos, I made comments about the aspect of validity and the process of comments, conclusions being made, but no explanation of actually how those conclusions were made. In here, they're saying that the first cause was God, because the premise is there had to be something ultimately powerful, I guess, at the beginning that did that. And they conclude that if something was there at the beginning, it had to be extremely powerful. And the result of that is, or let's say the explanation, I guess, is that because something had to be powerful in that light, in the aspect of something that started everything else has to be extremely powerful, and we conclude that that was a God. But there's no explanation that that actually is what had happened. That's just a conclusion that something had to start, and we conclude that that something is a God. But there's no explanation or proof that that actually occurred. And so that's my question. And again, the religious people, I would like you to explain that to me. I would like to know actually how you can come to the conclusion that the first cause was an all-powerful God. And again, I've been making these questions, and I've always been indicating, religious people as the target of the question, or at least the expected response to come from a religious person. But it really doesn't have to be. Anybody can answer this question. If they have a comment on it, and you want to give your comment, either you believe or don't believe, that's perfectly valid too. Again, I want this to be a discussion with people in general and not so much explicitly with certain type of people, even though my target is for a specific group. It's only because I want to get the input from the people who actually accept the claims so I can understand how they got to that acceptance. But I will listen to anybody who has a comment on it. So anybody can comment on this question. And if you can provide any sort of answer, I'll accept that too.
On a starry night, you look up at the sky and grasp the vastness of the universe. Everything that exists, from distant stars to the smallest leaf on a tree, seems to be here only briefly, and then it vanishes. Everything is born, grows, and eventually ceases to exist. But if everything is temporary, how can anything exist at all? Thomas Aquinas realized that everything in the universe is contingent. That is, it may or may not exist. Things depend on other things to come into being and require specific conditions to remain in existence. You exist because your parents existed before you. A tree grows because there is sunlight, water, and fertile soil. Stars shine because nuclear fusion occurs within them. Nothing in the universe explains its own existence. It all depends on something else. And here lies the problem. If everything depends on something else to exist, and each cause is supported by a previous one, we are once again faced with a dilemma. Can this chain go back infinitely? Or must there be something that does not depend on anything else to exist? If there were no being that existed by its very nature, then at some point in the past, nothing would have existed. And if there was ever a moment when nothing existed, then nothing could have ever come to be. Because from nothing, nothing comes. But we know the universe does exist. Therefore, there must be something that has always existed. Something that didn't need anything else to begin existing. This is what Thomas Aquinas called the necessary being. And Thomas Aquinas identifies this being as God.
Okay. This is again a continuation of the concept of cause and effect. The aspect of saying that there had to be something that started everything. And here they talk again about the aspect of seeing things, realizing that things have to come from things, and there had to be something there that started, the first thing, if we want to use that term. Again, there's a conclusion, and there's really no explanation of actually how that conclusion was achieved. I understand the aspect of it's to the point of not knowing how things started and just concluded had to be a certain way. Now, in the scientific community, that's never done. The way it's looked at is if there's something that's unknown, it's indicated as being unknown. There's no conclusion made from something that's unknown because there's no information that can be used to generate a conclusion. But with respect to these arguments, I'm seeing that something was unknown because they stated it specifically in the video that something had to be the start. What was it? Because of the aspects of something had to be there through eternity, which, again, that's a hard concept to come from because of the whole concept of exactly what is the start of everything. And as I talked about before, in the scientific arena, we talk about our universe, we talk about the start of our universe being a result of the expansion of a singularity, commonly known as the Big Bang, and that in the scientific community is what is described as the start. And it's because of the fact that it's not known what was there before that. And I've gone through other videos where it brought up that exact same point and said, okay, yeah, but what came before the Big Bang? And again, conclusions were made based on the aspects of not knowing and just assuming, making a conclusion without any information about what would be the cause. So, God has to be the cause. And I'm not going to argue with religious people about that claim. You can make that claim. Anybody can make any claim they want to make. It's just the aspect of, can you provide factual information that can be used to validate that claim? I don't see it. So I need again people to explain to me how that actually came about. And it could be the aspect of some people, because to say it's common knowledge, I guess, or it's an expected result, expected, a conclusion, because there's no other explanation that's possible. In the scientific community, that doesn't go. A conclusion that's specified because there's no information to actually identify and generate a conclusion. We come to this conclusion because this is how we feel. But feelings are not scientific. So again, I need the people who want to answer this question to answer this question. And I'd really like people to start to answer my questions because I've now got, a good amount of videos, and I've been asking questions and all of them, and I've gotten 0 responses. So I'm kind of wondering how many questions do I have to ask before I start getting answers, or at least responses to my questions. I don't want to say answer because I'm not looking for somebody to explicitly provide validation for the claims that are being made that are causing me to ask the questions I'm asking. It's just basically make the comments you want to make that provides me the understanding of how you look at it. And we can have a discussion from there.
Imagine walking into a dark room. Little by little, you begin to make out the shape of an object. At first, it appears incomplete, a vague silhouette. But as the light intensifies, you start to see its contours more clearly. Gradually, the object reveals itself in full detail. What once seemed uncertain and imperfect now becomes clear and well-defined. The light illuminating it allows you to see it as it truly is, in all its fullness. Yet even that revealed object, no matter how well lit, still bears the mark of limitation. It is not absolute, not eternal, and is subject to change or decay over time. Thomas Aquinas observed that everything in the universe exhibits varying degrees of perfection. Whether it's beauty, goodness, knowledge, or any other quality, there is always a hierarchy. Some things are more beautiful, more good, more perfect than others. But none of them is perfect in itself. Everything is subject to flaws, limitations, and change. A tree may be beautiful, but its beauty is temporary and vulnerable to age and decay. A person may be good, but human goodness is always relative, because human nature is inherently imperfect. These observations lead to a profound reflection on the idea of perfection. Does something truly perfect exist? Something that transcends all the limitations and deficiencies we see in contingent things? If there is a gradation of perfections, then there must be something beyond them all, something that is absolutely perfect, without flaws, unchangeable, and eternal. Something that cannot be improved, cannot become better, and is already complete in every way. Thomas Aquinas concluded that such a perfect being must exist, because it serves as the standard by which we recognize all other forms of perfection. And this being, according to him, is God.
Okay, this is a continuation. Now it's going down the aspects of the declaration of God. And it's based on conclusions that are being made that don't apparently have a concrete explanation. Now, again, that could be a philosophical debate about the aspect of perfection, but this video is concluding from obviously the person who actually initiated these comments, Mr. Aquinas, about the idealism of perfection being required, which would dictate that a God would be the explanation of that perfection. These are conclusions that are still being made, but there's no explanation of actually how they got to that conclusion. You can state something perfect has to exist, but how do you validate that that actually is this God? I'm not really sure. Again, the whole concept of perfection to me is very, ambiguous in what it actually is referring to, I guess. How people are making the conclusion that something's perfect, that would be very difficult, I think, to conclude. And the aspect of stating that something there at the beginning had to exist and it had to be perfect. And I just can't understand exactly how that conclusion is made. So again, another question to everybody is, how did this perfect being come about? exactly what is the way to validate that if this being exists, it's perfect. I don't have an answer to that myself, and that is something that I'm asking people to answer or to make comments on.
Imagine you're walking through a forest and come across a watch lying among the leaves. You pick it up and begin to examine it. You notice how its hands move with precise rhythm, how every gear inside it is perfectly placed, all working in harmony to keep time. Naturally, you wouldn't assume that the watch appeared by accident, formed randomly from sticks and leaves. On the contrary, its structure and function clearly point to a watchmaker, someone who designed and assembled each part with purpose. Now look at the universe. It is infinitely more complex than any watch, governed by precise laws that control everything from the movement of planets to the chemical reactions inside a cell. The seasons follow a predictable pattern. The human heart beats in a regulated rhythm. Light travels through a vacuum, obeying immutable mathematical constants. How could such order exist without an ordering intelligence behind it? Thomas Aquinas observed that nature operates according to ordered and harmonious principles. Yet he also recognized that natural elements themselves have no awareness or understanding to organize themselves in such a way. Plants don't decide to grow toward the sun. Planets don't choose to orbit stars. Birds didn't invent seasonal migration. And yet, all of these processes follow intelligible, objective patterns. How is that possible? For Aquinas, the only explanation is the existence of a supreme intelligence behind it all, a rational principle directing the order of the universe. Just as an arrow shot through the air needs an archer to aim it, the universe needs an intellect to guide and sustain it. If the universe were the result of pure chance, there would be no reason for its laws to remain constant. But the laws of physics and mathematics do not change over time. Gravity attracts objects in the same way everywhere in the cosmos. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. The structure of DNA follows a precise code. This level of order and predictability suggests something more than mere chaos. It points to rational design. This is the essence of Aquinas' fifth way. The existence of order and purpose in the universe points to the existence of an intelligent being that arranged it. This being cannot be limited like us, because limitation implies ignorance or imperfection. It must be the very source of all intelligence, the ultimate reason why everything works in such harmony. And for Thomas Aquinas, this being is God.
Okay, that's the end of the video. And of course, yes, I got it reactivated and start over again. I apologize. Okay, the last part dealt with probably the concept of not cause and effect, the concept of design, the concept of complexity can only occur because something actually produced it. They used the watchmaker argument at the beginning. And I've commented about these things in other videos, so you can view my other videos to see the specificness of my arguments for that. But in the end, there are conclusions that are being made, but not giving any kind of explanation of how those conclusions had been achieved. They only declare the aspect that things are complex. And because they're complex, they have to come from something that had the ability to put them together. Indicate the fact that intelligence had to be the cause. And the fact that because we're talking about the universe as a whole, the intelligence that put that together had to be extremely intelligent. And the conclusion was the only thing that could have done that was a god. I'm not going to argue that that's a argument, that's a claim, but the, let's say, identification of an explanation or an explanation that was given to me is not valid. Just stating that something is complex and that complexity has to come from a maker doesn't prove that. It just states that. If you state the fact that this is complex, first thing you have to do is you have to prove to me that that's complex. And exactly what do you mean by complex? In this video here, they're talking about the aspect of it had to be put together because it's too complex to occur by nature. So we need to know exactly how it was put together, or I should say, I'll go back. We have to explain why it's complex, why it needed to be designed, how it was designed, who designed it, and, provide validation that that was a god. There's lots of things that have to be done here to make these claims that are not being done. These are just declarations with the aspect of it doesn't make any sense for them not to be. And as I said in this video and other videos that I have done is, because there's an unknown, you can't come to a conclusion. That's not possible. You have to be honest in stating that you do not know. And that aspect of not knowing would indicate the lack of the declaration, I guess, of something that did all this stuff and was the cause of what we see today. I need to have that information because to me that's information that's valid, that's concrete, that provides me the ability to understand that that is the way it is. If I'm not intelligent to be able to understand that, then I'm also not really intelligent enough to understand the aspect of a whole powerful super being that created it. It seems to be those two things are out of my capability to comprehend. But I'm hoping the aspect that I have some level of comprehension where some things, if they were explained appropriately and completely, that I could come to some level of understanding. That's what I'm asking for. And again, for those who want to answer, if you can explain this concept or this premise of a being that's required to basically have initiated, started, created everything at a universal level, like the universe exists because of this thing that made everything. As I indicated, then the scientific, viewpoint, everything that we see was a result of the expansion of the singularity, aka the Big Bang, and that all the things that are a result of that is because of how things evolved, things have moved. I say evolved, but I don't want to say that because people are going to think I'm talking biology. I just meant the aspect of how something became what it is because it had to basically migrate through stages and such to get to where it's at. The concept of, let's say, atoms. At the beginning, there were no atoms because it was just, the energy was too extreme where atoms could not exist in general. And as the universe starts to cool down, atoms and that were able to form. And everything else is basically a consequence and result of all that initial activity. That's the way I look at it. But you guys got to explain to me why that's wrong or why that's not seeing the big picture, and explain to me what the big picture is so that way I actually have a better understanding. And if you could do that, that would be great. I'm going to leave things there. I want to thank you for watching my video. If you liked what you saw and you would like to become a member of my stream, that would be fantastic. Again, it would help me build up my subscription list, which would allow me to get to the point where I can activate the YouTube monetary program, where I can start generating revenue based on what I'm doing here, because I'm spending actually quite a bit of time on it now. And because I would actually like to see some sort of result of it. And if I can get that, that would be great. And if you can help me out getting to that point, that would be great too. I'm going to leave things there, and thank you again one more time, and I will say goodbye.